Greetings. This is the Northwest College class, and what I want to do now is I want to talk through that skeleton guide. So you should probably have that out in front of you, and I want to outline this now in a little bit more detail. I want to talk a little bit about the form of a formal essay, and by form here I mean quite literally the way it looks on the page. Now, understand, from here on out, for the rest of our time in this class and then the classes to come, the expectations if you're writing a paper is that they look like this. They conform to this basic guideline, okay? Let's first of all get a few logistics out of the way one more time, and I realize almost everything I'm saying now is review, but that's okay. It's good to review. First of all, let's talk about the papers must be typed. They must be double-spaced. We usually work with 10-point or 11-point font size, and then normally a very traditional font like Times New Roman. Okay? In other words, we don't want to do this thing where we're, for example, writing our fonts in cursive or something like that. We don't want to do any of that. The idea is you want to make the paper as legible, readable for your prof as you can. Okay? Now, in terms of the way the paper looks, the form of the paper itself, you always want to make sure that you have some kind of login information on the paper, your name, the instructor's name, the assignment, whatever it is. So, for example, this one coming up, you have to write an opinion paper. You're obviously going to say this is writing assessment number 2, your opinion paper, for example. Okay? Then you're going to skip a couple of lines, and we're going to begin with our 2 titles. Now again, let's just review. 2 titles, okay? 2 titles. Title number 1 is what we call a creative title. Okay? Title number 2 is what we call the academic title. Okay? Now, these 2 titles are complementary. In other words, we want to make sure, I'm going to move this so that I get better visual on my whiteboard, all right, for my students that are watching. We want to make sure that what we're doing with our titles is that we're complementing our assigned topic or thesis, all right? So, for example, if the assignment is to write on let's say you have to write on the city you would like to visit somewhere in the world, you want to make sure that your titles represent that topic in some way. Now, on the creative side, it can be anything you want, right? So, for example, I'm going to stick with this as my topic for now, my whole presentation. A city that I would like to visit is Jerusalem, and I would like to visit Jerusalem for what reasons, okay? So my titles will be something maybe like Wailing Wall or Miss would be a creative title. Why? Because the Wailing Wall, a famous site, holy site in Jerusalem. But then my academic title is going to sit under the creative title, again, in parentheses, with special language that always kind of makes the creative title look very predictable. A discussion of, an analysis of, a treatment of, for example, an analysis of 3 reasons why I want to visit Jerusalem. Done. Now the instructor knows what the topic is that you're writing to. In a history class, the 3 causes of the American Civil War. In a biology class, the 3 important values of photosynthesis. Whatever it is that you're writing on. Got me? After this, then we're going to skip a couple of lines, and then we're ready to start our actual paper. And again, here we're working with paragraphing. Now let's define paragraphing again real quickly. A unit of sentences, at least 5 to 7 sentences that have a common theme or idea. That's what we call a paragraph. So when we're talking paragraphing, we're at least talking always about 5 paragraphs. And for our work here now, we're talking about 5 of those paragraphs. Okay? Then we begin our essay itself. And we've got paragraph number 1, which is what we call our intro paragraph. Now again, look at that skeleton guide and identify that the very first thing I want to see is what we call a hook line, or a good hook sentence. You are not going to say, Jerusalem is the city that I want to visit, as the first sentence of your essay. Why? Because that's what we will call your thesis sentence, and we're going to reserve that one for later on in that paragraph we call the intro paragraph. Okay? We're going to set up our thesis with a few important sentences. There they are listed for you on a skeleton guide. We're going to have a good first line. We're going to define some terms for ourselves if we need to. We're going to make some reference to an author and a text if we have to be writing on that. Remember, when we are in our 1020 Lit course, we have to write these kinds of papers, okay? We'll practice this here in a few weeks, as a matter of fact, just to kind of get an idea what that looks like, okay? Finally, we're going to come to our actual thesis, and we will ask, as we're looking at it, that our thesis be the last sentence of this first paragraph. And what is it that this thesis looks like? Well, again, let's get a couple of things out of the way. That thesis sentence cannot be asked in the form of a question. So, for example, at the end of my intro paragraph, I can't have a sentence that says, what city do I want to visit before I die? Question mark. Way wrong answer. Okay, way wrong answer. We need to make sure that we actually are going to declare our thesis sentence. It's as simple as then the following. Jerusalem is a city I would like to visit. Another way for our thesis, there are 3 reasons why I would like to visit the city of Jerusalem. Done. Got me? Now our thesis then, as we say, must have some relationship to at least 2 concepts. In the example that I'm working with, Jerusalem being my favorite city, jot down what would for you be the understanding of those 2 concepts. Write them down real quickly. What are those 2 concepts? What we will call A to B. And I'll come back to kind of explain it here after you try.
I don't get it.
Okay? We're asking you in your thesis sentence to always relate one concept to another, right? So think about this. If my A is the city of Jerusalem, right? What is my B? 3 reasons why I what? I want to visit, right? In other words, in this paper, I'm not just writing about the city of Jerusalem, am I? I'm writing about 3 reasons why I want to visit the city of Jerusalem. See, I could be writing about 3 reasons why I don't want to visit the city of Jerusalem, correct? Right? So in other words, I always have to make sure that my thesis possesses both of these sides of the thesis paradigm, we will call it. A to B. A, one concept, the city of Jerusalem. B, another concept, 3 reasons why I want to visit. Okay? Or I could change it. And the thesis could be, there are 3 reasons why Jerusalem is the most important city in the world. Notice in that thesis, that's got nothing to do with me wanting to visit or not visit Jerusalem, right? It has to do with a historical, political understanding of the importance of that city, right? Either way, my thesis involves some mention of Jerusalem and some mention of a B. In this case, though, I'm just going to stick with 3 reasons why I want to visit. Done. Once I've written my intro paragraph and I got a good thesis, I'm halfway done with the writing of my paper. No kidding. Profs will spend a lot of time studying this intro paragraph and especially looking at your thesis. If you have a cleanly stated thesis, the instructor or the prof knows, okay, she's on the right track. Okay? If, for example, the thesis says something about the history of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, the prof knows right away something's wrong here. Okay? The assignment was to write about a city you want to visit, and now you're talking about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Is that because you want to visit Dallas? Well, maybe, but it's not clear. And what is it that we're doing when we're writing these kinds of papers? Well, there's 2 ways these papers normally get written. One way is like this. There are a lot of cities in the world, and I don't know. I guess I'd like to. Well, I suppose Jerusalem's not a bad idea. I suppose I could do. Hey, you know, Dallas. I was in Dallas once. That was a pretty interesting. Oh yeah, there's this other thing I thought I would say about. Oh yeah. Metaphorically speaking, that's kind of the way the paper looks. That's one way. Another way is to say, Jerusalem is the city I want to visit. First reason I want to visit Jerusalem. Second reason I want to visit Jerusalem. Third reason I want to visit Jerusalem. My conclusion regarding visiting Jerusalem. A, bad. B, that's our academic essay. Do you got me? Okay? So everything about following the skeleton guide is about being very clean, linear, is another way to say it, well-ordered, planned. So it goes without saying that before you sit down to write one of these things, you might want to make an outline. What's that outline going to look like? Well, at least 4 sentences. A thesis, and then 3 topic sentences. If you're going to write about going to Jerusalem to visit, you might want to think about 3 reasons why you want to go to Jerusalem to visit. You will find it's much easier to write these essays if you have a clean understanding of the outline. Because when you make this outline, you can start with 4 simple sentences, a thesis and 3 topic sentences. But then in your outline, underneath each one of those sentences, you can come up with ideas. What is it that I want to say about? Got me? And that will allow you early on to realize, do I have enough information to get my 5 to 7 sentence paragraphs? If I don't have enough information in my planning outline, then I'm going to struggle when it comes time to write one of these things. I may get really frustrated because I can't come up with enough information to write on a topic. You don't want to be in the middle of writing the paper when you discover that. Crap, I don't have a lot to say on this topic. I need to start thinking. Now I'm getting frustrated because I'm wasting a lot of my time. And then all of a sudden my writing starts to look kind of like this. And the problem with this is that it's very hard to edit. It's very hard to read for a prof, but it's very hard to edit for you. Right? Because you have no ordered, disciplined understanding of your thesis and your topic sentences. So the skeleton guide's objective is to have a clean, now I'll just use the word map, right? A map. The skeleton guide helps you to create an outline that becomes like a map for yourself. So there it is sitting there, and of course you're working. By the way, I should say, this is the way jam writing works though, which is good, and that's what we want. Jam writing allows us to be able to find ideas. But remember, go back to that lecture. We begin with jam writing to find ideas so that we can then take those ideas and turn them into that. The skeleton guide is the way you know that you're following that. The first step then in the skeleton guide, other than the obvious ones of the 2 titles, the login, etc., is this sentence right here. A cleanly stated thesis. Jerusalem is a city I wish to visit for 3 important reasons. That is a cleanly stated thesis. There's no standing around scratching yourself as a prof trying to figure out what this paper is about. Now notice how the thesis is related to the academic title, right? So for example, if I'm going to mention in the academic title 3 reasons to visit Jerusalem, I'm obviously going to mention it in my thesis as well. These 2 are, to use an academic term, symbiotic. They go together. Okay? And again, if you've got, believe it or not, if you've got this done in the intro paragraph, you're halfway done in terms of your paper. A lot of profs, if you've got this done, are already giving your paper a C or higher. Assuming all the grammatical stuff being taken care of. We'll talk about that in a while. Okay? Now, after I've got my thesis, I'm now ready to go to my points of validation. I'm just going to remove some of this so I got room to write, okay? Points of validation, or POVs, as we'll often refer to it. It's pretty simple. The word validate means to prove. Got me? So if I'm going to say Jerusalem is a town I'd like to visit, then I got to come up with reasons why I want to visit Jerusalem. Got me? Those reasons, right, are what we will call points of validation, or POVs. Okay? Now the way that this works, again, paragraphing. Everything is about paragraphing. Again, just to remind, 5 to 7 sentences organized around a single idea. Okay? 5 to 7 sentences organized around a single idea. For each one of our POVs, POV number 1 then, POV number 2, and POV number 3, we're always going to begin those paragraphs with what we will call a topic sentence. Now that makes sense if you'll think about it. We want to have, as our paragraph, a single unifying idea. We want to present that idea in the very first sentence of our paragraph. Now, the technically speaking, the truth is, you can put this topic sentence in 3 different places in a paragraph. You can put it as the first sentence, you can put it as the last sentence, or you can put it as a sentence somewhere in between. But I always recommend that you put it as the first sentence of a paragraph. Why? Go back to my little word picture. We don't want, we don't want that. We want to come off as being very cleanly organized in our writing. It will be a way that the instructor doesn't have to spend a tremendous amount of time to find out whether you understand what it is that you're doing. Got me? You gotta, again, understand, when you are writing academic essays, you and the prof are playing a little game. It's a game you can only play well if you understand the rules. If you are in a lit class and the prof asks you to write on Shakespeare's play Hamlet, the prof does not sit down with a stack of papers from his or her class and say, yay, I get to read a bunch of papers on Hamlet so I can learn new things about Hamlet. Now that doesn't mean that a prof can't learn new things. We learn new things all the time. But that's not the reason the prof is assigning the paper to you. The reason the prof is assigning the paper to you is so that you can show the prof, I understand how to play the game of academic discourse, where the prof will give the assignment, write a paper on Hamlet, write a paper about the city you'd like to visit, and then you say back to the prof, I understand the game that we're playing. And the fundamental rule of the game is organization. I have to be organized, and then I'm going to present my ideas to you, and I'll do that in the form of an academic essay. If I play that game well, then you're going to give me a top grade. It really doesn't matter to the prof what city you choose that you want to visit. The prof could, not to sound harsh, care less, right? The reality is that the assignments that are given to you as a way to play the game. The beautiful thing about that, some students say, well, I don't like that because it's almost as if the prof could care less about me and my ideas. But I would say it this way. What really is being focused on is you're learning how to communicate. Right? And if you play the game well, the prof understands what you are communicating. So the key, again, is being able to have 4 clean sentences in a traditional 5-paragraph essay. That first sentence we've mentioned already is the thesis. Now let's talk about these topic sentences. Points of validation. Validation just means to prove or a reason for your opinion. If I have already said in my thesis, Jerusalem is a city I want to visit for 3 reasons, then I'm going to take that A to B understanding and I'm going to apply it then in each one of my topic sentences. Each one of my topic sentences then will have some element of my A and some element of my B. Okay? For example, in my first topic sentence, if I say, one reason I want to visit Jerusalem, that's element of my A, is because it is a tremendously cultural city with a very rich history. I've given one of my reasons why I want to visit Jerusalem. I've mentioned Jerusalem or some element about Jerusalem, and I've also mentioned a reason why that I want to visit it because of some element, right, in regards to Jerusalem. See the relationship? Once I have a cleanly stated topic sentence, I then can provide reasons within my paragraph. Okay? Now this reasons or validations can come from 2 different places. One, they can come from yourself. Right? Your own understanding, your own knowledge, whatever. 2, they can come from outside yourself, or what I'll just simply call other. Make sense? So for example, I go online, I read something about Jerusalem's cultural history on the Wikipedia site or on Britannica or whatever. If I want to talk about that information, that's the other. Make sense? Everybody agree with that? Do you have any questions at this point? As we're kind of pausing here? Okay, so when I then look at each one of my points of validation, I have to make sure that I am involved in some interest comments from my own self as well as from other sources. This is what we call sources. Okay, sources. And the way we're going to find that stuff is research, right? Which makes sense. I'm going to research online and read about it or whatever, okay? And when I quote that research, we're going to use a special word called citing that research, C-I-T-E, right? In other words, I go online to Britannica's online encyclopedia. I read about the amazing history of Jerusalem, cultural history, and I say one of the really cool things about Jerusalem's cultural history, blah, 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 and I provide that information. I've got to say where I got it. Easy. Now we have a special way to do that that we'll go into in more detail later. It's what we call a citation manual, just the rules for citing, that's all. And the rules are actually pretty simple. Whatever it is that you found, you have to give the prof enough information. So if the prof wanted to go find the same source, the prof could. Easy. Okay? Any questions about what it is that we're doing here? So we're going to do this here. We're going to do it again for our second POV. And then finally, we're going to do it for our third POV. Okay? So technically speaking, if we want to do some quick mathematics here, I suppose we could. You've got at least 5 to 7 sentences times 5 paragraphs. 5 times 5 is 25, so an easy way to say this is somewhere between 25 to 35 sentences or more is what this essay constitutes in terms of basic length. Make sense? Okay. Now, at a foundational level, that's what we learn how to do, is to write one of these kinds of essays. Finally, of course, paragraph number 5 is what we call our conclusion, right? And in our conclusion paragraph, again, just to remind, we're trying to do what? We're trying to restate our thesis and re-summarize our primary points of validation. I've given 3 reasons in my essay why I want to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to just review those one more time. Got me?
But you're not going to write the first paragraph word for word again, are you?
No, you're not.
Okay,
you're
just
not.
Reword it.
It's like a mirroring almost. A mirroring of the first paragraph, the intro paragraph. But you try and change the wording,
right,
so that it doesn't look and sound exactly the same. Okay. What some writers will do is they'll vary or change the 3 POVs, so that they, for example, will say POV number 2 first, and then POV number 3 second, that kind of thing. And they vary, in other words, and that's fine. The most important thing, the conclusion paragraph, is that it's showing the instructor that you're kind of ready to finish the essay. What a lot of students will do is they just finish with their 3rd POV and then they're done. Done! Which comes across again like this craziness that I had on the board. Again, you want to leave the essay with some certainty, some power, and the easy way to do that is to have a clean conclusion paragraph. Now, we will talk about what we call extending beyond the thesis. In other words, you're saying something in that conclusion paragraph that it goes beyond the thesis that you were already working with. For example, not only is Jerusalem a city that I would really like to visit, but Rome is also a city that I would like to visit. It's a way to kind of finish the essay by extending beyond the thesis. Okay? Now, let's talk real quickly. Does this all make sense? Questions about any of this? Okay. So now let's talk real quickly about the best way to edit these papers. Now, when you're handing in writing assessments and type papers from here on out, see, I get to start jacking your papers pretty good. So as you hand these in to me, it would make sense that you go through some kind of edit revision process. Now, when we edit or we revise, we've already got a first draft finished. And now we're ready to start working with that first draft as we get ready to create second and more drafts, okay? Draft is just a word for the paper itself, all right? Now again, the way you want to do this is the upside down pyramid. So let's spend some time now with the upside down pyramid reminding ourselves about this. You're going to do multiple what we call sweeps or readings of your paper, all right? Multiple sweeps or readings of your paper, okay? And by that, we, again, just want to remind, we're going to start with the very issue of our topic or our thesis, okay? So we're going to start there in our first sweep. If we have been assigned a certain topic that we have to write on, then what we really want to do is to make sure that we're writing to that topic. If you have to write an opinion paper, you want to be sure that that's what you're doing. If you're asked to write a persuasive essay, you want to be sure that's what you're doing. The kinds or the types of essays that you would be writing, we really spend all of the 1010 class learning how to write. So we know what those essays kind of look and sound like, okay? After we've done a sweep of the paper for our topics, sentence, and thesis work, now we're ready to start looking at the actual sentences themselves. Again, we're looking for issues about fragments and that kind of thing. Then secondly, after that, we're going to look at issues of pronoun use, right? And that goes back to that grammar stuff. Everyone forgot his or her notebook instead of their notebook and all that kind of stuff, right? After that, then we start worrying about issues of wording, spelling, and all of those kinds of things, okay? And then some of the more other nuances of grammar usage and that kind of thing. I can't emphasize enough the importance of multiple eyes. By that I mean the following. You got to have more people than just yourself looking at a paper before you hand it in to a prof. You cannot rely as well just on grammar software checking your problems. Because, for example, you may have the word spelled correctly, you just use the wrong there, T-H-E-I-R versus T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E. They both sound the same, and computer software is not going to always catch that kind of stuff. So you have the technology of the internet. You can always write to people, send your papers, please read, please edit, that kind of thing. So that when you finish your paper and you're ready to hand it in to the instructor, you have some real good idea about the validity of the paper. If you've followed Skeleton Guide well and you've done proper grammar and mechanics revisions, then you should be okay in regards to the score that you would get on the paper. The instructor will usually have two ways to critique your paper. One will be the basic Skeleton Guide and grammar issues. Okay, so for example, if you've got a comma splice, point it out. If you've got if you've got issues that haven't been done in regards to Skeleton Guide, point it out. The second kind of comment by the prof is to say, all right, you did the basic things of the Skeleton Guide really well, but now let me give you some suggestions on ways you could have even made the paper stronger. In other words, taking the paper to the next level, trying to improve it in some way. And a lot of times profs will do this at the freshman-sophomore year because they're aware that you're going to have to continue to do this kind of writing at the junior-senior year. And obviously by the time you're a junior and senior, you're not writing 5-paragraph essays. You're obviously writing something a little bit longer than that. And we should point out, if you continue to work within the academic community, back to an earlier lecture about being a prof at Stanford researching cancer, and she writes that paper that's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, that essay is obviously going to be something more than a 5-paragraph essay. However, in terms of the fundamentals of the way the paper is laid out, it's going to follow a very similar guide. It's going to follow the Skeleton Guide. Remember, learning how to follow the Skeleton Guide is kind of like learning how to play scale music in music theory. Na 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 na. You learn how to practice it over and over again so that ultimately you can begin to do something quite advanced in regards to those notes. Make sense? In our class, in the basic class, we really learn how to write to the Skeleton Guide so that we can, in the 1010 class, begin to amplify or to move beyond. In other words, you start to learn the na 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 so that you can begin to do more advanced kinds of writing. Okay? But when it's all said and done, the writing will look in the end the way it kind of looked at the beginning in terms of the skeleton of the essay. And that's why we call it a skeleton guide. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions that you have about that?